Welcome to Recovery His Way. I'm your host, Tom Reynolds, and today I'm excited to have a very special guest with me, a very dear friend of mine, who's also a staff member at His Way, Dana Mercier. Dana, good to have you with us today.
Glad to be here with you, Tom.
I know we originally met, we were just discussing, we've known each other for about 10 years.
Yes.
And you originally came here in May of 2011, and you graduated the first time in 6 months and stayed for a year, and were one of our first year-long graduates, and you've continued to be a part of the His Way family ever since. You've never even left for a moment. So it's been great to have you part of the family. I know you're a special part of my life and have been a special part of a lot of guys' lives here. I want to start with, of course, a story I'm familiar with that obviously our audience would not be, which just is kind of your background, your recovery story. What was your journey in recovery? What brought you to seeking Christ-centered recovery in your life?
Well, Tom, I guess seeking a Christ-centered recovery for me didn't happen until later in my years, approximately a little less than 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago. I was brought up as a Catholic and was brought up in Attleboro, Massachusetts. I come from a broken home. My home was broken up when I was about 8 years old, and by the time I was 16, I was so fed up with that life that I ran away from home and grew up on my own in the streets of Boston, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, all over the place.
Wow.
And this was all back in the 60s, so you can imagine some of the mischief I was getting into in the 60s. I was into all of that mischief, and so
did you make it to Woodstock in your journey?
I almost made it to Woodstock. We had 2 flats and turned around in a Volkswagen bus, but I came very close to getting there. Yes, but my lifestyle was a lot like that back then. I mean, just about everybody that wasn't a good kid doing the right things in the 60s was doing the wrong things in the 60s, and I was one of the wrong things in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much how I grew up most of my life. I'd never really considered myself an addict when I was younger. I would call myself a casual user, but I used just about everything. Everything from psychedelics to marijuana and drinking. I was never really a big drinker. Drinking never really affected me. I would go right from just feeling a little good to sick drunk. So there was no in between for me. So I couldn't get any enjoyment out of that. So I never really liked drinking alcohol. I guess I started using a little bit more casual when I was living in Boston after I got to be around 18 years old. Of course, living on the streets of Boston, you have only, so many options. It's kind of hard to get a job when you've really got no background and you've got no address, and so you have to pretty much settle for what you can do. And for me, it was either it seemed like I had 2 choices. I could deal drugs or rob and steal or be a male prostitute. Didn't want to be either one of I didn't want to be a male prostitute, so it was a combination of I started my career off stealing when I was younger, and then I went to dealing drugs because for me it seemed safer. And I did that for many years, and in those years I was probably selling mostly cocaine. And back in them days, in the 70s, it was really not even a Class A drug. It was basically, they treated it back in the 70s like it was less of a drug than marijuana was. So it didn't seem like a big deal, I guess, to me at the time. And so, along with, I always used drugs. And, ever since I was about 13, I started using drugs. So when the cocaine thing started, I'd snort a lot of the cocaine, and after about 5 or 6 years of snorting cocaine, I couldn't snort it no more, and then I ended up using intravenously. And eventually, that's what brought me down here, because after about two and a half years of that, I was really sick and tired. and I didn't want to do that no more. I didn't feel like I was an addict. I actually didn't have to go to a program to stop. All I had to do was come to Alabama at that point. And I came here and stayed with my mom. This was in 1986.
Okay.
And I stayed there. I got me a job within 2 weeks at the Chevrolet place, and actually ended up working there for about 15 years. Met my wife here in Alabama, and we actually met at a Stars baseball game.
Okay.
That my work took me to as a gift for some good work that I did, and we ended up getting married in 1990, and we were together for about 14 and a half years. Of course, around the 12th year of my marriage, things were really good. I might have smoked a little bit of pot or drank a few beers with some friends, but I really didn't get back into using or getting any, mischief or anything. And when we had a pool table in my back, I had a detached garage in the backyard, and we had a pool table out there. And some of my friends from work basically would come over every Tuesday night, and we would have what we call pool night. We'd smoke a couple of joints, drink a few beers, and play pool for about 2 or 3 hours, and then that was it. And after a couple of years of doing that, one of my friends bought a friend who had a friend with him that had some crack cocaine. And of course, without thinking about it, being a part of my history, and I smoked some, and everybody smoked some. And then it seemed like that person just kept coming back every Tuesday, and I was always ready to smoke some. And after a couple of weeks, my friend stopped coming, and it was just me and him sitting there smoking. And then I guess that was the beginning of becoming an addict to me in my eyes, because something seemed to snap in me that made me, I don't know, I guess compulsive. I would chase the drug, and I chased it pretty hard. I would go to, eventually he stopped coming, and I had to stop buying it. And of course, that went most of, my paycheck would end up, disappearing, and I'd have to come up with excuses and stuff and all that. And I'd be out in the garage all night long, and eventually, Angela, it took her a long time because she didn't really live that life or know that life at all, because she grew up in Church of Christ, and she was very, I would call goody two shoes. She didn't, she never drank. She never used any kind of drugs. She never gambled. She was just a good girl, As a matter of fact, when I first met her, I had an opportunity to go out with her or her friend. And her friend was just too eager, and I had to live that life so long that I didn't want none of that. I could see something different in Angela, and there was something different in her. Right. And, so anyway, I ended up with her instead, and it was good, very good for me, But of course, once I started smoking that crack cocaine, the monster was awoken in me. Without me even realizing it. Before you know it, I was going in a downhill spiral.
How old were you about this time?
I was, this was in 2002 when I started smoking again. By the time 2004, I was out of the house, lost my job, and at that point, I went through every dealership in town pretty much as a service advisor, bumping from one to the other and failing. At one point, I actually had a few years clean. And at the end of those 3 years, I guess what got me going again was I just still felt miserable. Something was missing. Didn't know what it was at that point. I knew that something wasn't there to help me stay clean.
Right.
And so I ended up going back out and messing up again, losing another job, and I actually moved out of home and then moved back in for a little while, and then I got bad again, and I had to go. So we ended up getting divorced, and we went through a custody battle, but not much of a battle because I knew if I was to fight for anything, I would be just taking from her, and I wouldn't have been at that point, in my eyes, a good father. So I didn't want to take Meredith from her. So I very easily gave up everything so that she would be okay,
Right.
and went on my own. Basically went on my own so that I could use in peace, because that's the way I felt at the time.
Right.
So when I left, I was pretty. I told Angela some lies, just to make her feel bad enough to let me go, because I knew it wasn't going to be easy for her to let me go.
Okay.
So anyway, I ended up, after a little while, ended up in jail. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm about 99% sure one of our staff members was a policeman and arrested me in 2003.
Oh, okay.
That was my first arrest.
Oh, okay.
That one was a short one. I got in and out. Mom bailed me out of jail, and I ended up going back to work, and I ended up having to go to a rehab. I think I went to Bradford, and then I did a thing in Bradford for 29 days, and then went through the outpatient, and then ended up getting arrested again, because I went back out there after that, and ended up going to New Horizons, and I had to do 18 months there. And during that 18 months, I had relapsed about 3 times, and all 3 times I failed my drug test, and that third time they put me back in jail for 72 hours to think about it. And then when I went back to court, it was family drug court at the time, and I begged the judge to give me another chance, and she did, and I did okay for a while. That was when I ended up with the 3 years clean. I did pretty good then. I don't remember the exact time frame. I'd have to really look back at that. But anyway, I guess shortly after getting through all that, I had another relapse. I had bought a house over on Hillsborough Drive, and I had my mom living with me. And I ended up getting arrested there for receiving stolen property. I was stealing property so that I could pay for drugs. That was probably the beginning of, I call today is a blessing. Because I ended up sitting in jail for 11 months. And then during that time, my mom came to visit me pretty regular. No one else wanted to have anything to do with me at that point. I had burnt all my job bridges. I had all my family members outside of my mother didn't want to have nothing to do with me. And the last time I had saw Angela, Meredith was in the yard and didn't want to come near me, and I didn't blame her. At the time, I didn't understand it, but when I look back at it now, I surely understand. But while I was sitting in jail, I had time to think about that, and I'd say that was probably where I felt the most desperate, and wanted something different, and I still didn't know how to get it, but I wanted something different, and I knew it, and I was desperate for it. There was a combination of things while I was in jail. There were some guys in there that had their own little service on Sundays, and they were doing things like drawing up their own little, bulletins like we have at church now. They made their own little bulletins, and they asked me, because I was drawing, and they asked me if I would draw something on the front of the bulletin for them, so I did. And I ended up doing some services with them, and we sang and stuff, and I enjoyed that. They were all reading the Bible. At that point, I wasn't reading the Bible, but then my mom came to visit me this one time, and just out of the blue told me I should read Job in the Bible. And so I read Job in the Bible, and at first I could see some similarities, but it really didn't do anything to move me. So I was continued to read the Bible, but there's something kept telling me I need to go back and try to understand what I was supposed to understand in Job that I missed, because I felt like I missed something. So I read Job again, and after reading it a second time, I had a better idea of how I could relate to that story in a way. I mean, his was a lot more severe than mine was.
Sure.
of course, but mine was, my life, if I look back at my whole life, was pretty messed up, and and I look back at that and I can relate to it in that aspect. But the only thing that was missing in my life is I didn't have God in my life like Job did. So
what prompted, obviously at some point you had heard about His Way and you came up here and wanted to get involved in the program. How did you hear about it? What prompted you to say that some kind of Christ-centered program was something that you'd be looking for?
Well, when my 11 months was up in jail, I went to had to go see my probation officer, and the first thing he said to me was, "Well, Dana, what are you going to do now?" And I knew that was a prompt question, so I told him, I says, "I guess I'm going to have to go to a rehabilitation center," because I knew he was going to violate me if I didn't, So I did some research. I didn't just decide to go to a Christ-centered research center. I didn't know at that particular minute that one existed. I went and I got approved for the Salvation Army's program, and I got approved for Life Ministries program. They were going to actually send me to Virginia. They was ready to send me to a farm in Virginia. And when I went back to the Salvation Army, I decided on the Salvation Army, and I went back to talk to, I think the lady's name was either Kathy or Carol, I can't remember. But she asked me if I heard about a place called His Way. And she started explaining to me that it was Christ-centered and all that, and that interested me. So she said, "Look, you got to go online to try to find a phone number to call them." I said, so me and my mom, I went to my mom's and we were looking on my computer, and because I had it up there at my mother's house, and we couldn't find it. It took a while. Finally, we found the number, and I called, and I came down here and had one interview. There was something when I came down here for that interview, when I walked on the property, it's almost like you could feel God's presence is here. And then the second time it really hit me. The second time I came, I got to meet people. I got to see how this place was working. I got a tour, and then I had that interview with you. And one of the things I think that helped me a lot in my recovery was with that interview with you. I got things off of my chest, and that were there that I never told anybody else.
Why do you think you were prompted to do that?
I don't know. I'm thinking that God prompted me to do that. It's still an emotional thing for me to even talk about it, but it was just an emotional time, the things that I had to talk about, and I knew I had to talk about them because, a lot of, all the recovery that I've been through, one of the things they say is you've got to let go of things, get things out.
Right.
Otherwise, they're not going to go away.
Right.
And I guess after about 3 months of being here, maybe 2 months, I can't exactly 100% remember. You and I started talking about I wanted to get baptized, because I actually wanted to get baptized while I was in jail, and I decided no, I'm not going to do it while I'm in here because it's too desperate. And I wanted to make sure that if I did get baptized, that I was all in, and I had the opportunity to be all in the way I would want to be. And also wanted to feel like I could, because I wasn't 100% sure what all was all about, And one of the things I learned here, and in some of the readings you had me read, I learned that you have to trust, you have to believe, and you have to give yourself to God. And that's what I wanted to do. Matter of fact, when you baptized me, when I got up there to get baptized, I had a sheet of paper in my pocket with some things that I was going to say about, why I was, what my confession was. And something prompted me to say something else. And I could only assume that was God doing that, And the strange thing about after I said it, You know, after I was baptized and after I said my thing, which I said was I was tired of living in a lie. I wanted to live in the truth, in the light. And that's still emotional just to think about it, you know? Because that is where I guess I did the 180, you know? It's where everything in my life changed. You know, when I came to His way at first, you know, just like a lot of the guys that come here, one of the things that I thought about was I want my life back.
Right.
I want to get my family, my job, and all those things back, you know. And I never got any of those things back. I got something else. But what I got was my relationship with God. And that relationship I guess it filled that void that I couldn't fill myself, you know.
Right.
So, you know, from there, I guess I would notice things differently. You know, like I would, but next time I went to go see my wife, for instance, you know, there was always, you got the money, or, you know, there was always a cold conversation, never really a nice conversation, not even a how are you doing. If it was a how are you doing, are you going to meetings, are you doing this, there's always something to do with me being, you know, into recovery.
Right.
And after that, she never talked to me like that again.
Yeah.
You know, it was always, it's almost like God put in her heart to talk to me differently, you know.
Right.
And that's how I look at it.
Right. Well, I know, you know, May 31st of 2012, you would agree you graduated here. And you've stayed plugged in since then. I guess I'm interested, too, in just since you've kind of technically left His way in terms of being a resident, what kind of things have you always had in place to kind of maintain the life that you'd started, that God, you know, like you said, He didn't give you back your old life. What He did is He gave you a brand new life and a brand new reason. I guess, what are some of the things you feel like you're doing or have done over that period of time that, I mean, because, you know, in recovery, there's not a lot of guys who have a 10-year story a lot of times to tell like you have. What are some of the things you've been doing? Well,
the most important thing I think I learned in recovery here was the one thing I heard drilled to me more than anything else was you need to stay plugged in. You need to stay involved. You need to be in recovery at all. You need to think recovery all the time. And when it came to my year graduation and time to go, I didn't want to go. As simple as I didn't 100% trust myself to be out there on my own. I needed to be right where I was. So that's when I decided I wanted to stay and work here. And I stayed as a resident manager, I think, for 3 years after that, staying and living here. And I even started my lawn care business while I was a resident manager in the evenings and doing lawn care during the day. And actually Clyde Jones and Richard Brown both helped me to get that little venture started. You know, I borrowed a lawnmower from Richard, a ride lawnmower, and Clyde helped me buy a little tiny trailer and some equipment for that lawn care business. And the reason I started that lawn care business was, my main reason was so that I could be a servant and help guys that were here, that because I knew that was the kind of work that just about anybody could do. That, you know, I was very lucky to have somebody help me finish paying my way in, because when I first came here, if you remember, I was working at Labor Finders and staying at the Salvation Army, and I only had half the money to get in. And when I got in, God seemed to put those, in my first 30 days, avenues of work to help me get my tuition paid. And I remembered that, and I remembered how great that felt to have somebody help me to do that, and, to get that bill paid before I got to the point where my 30 days was up. You know? So I wanted to be able to help somebody do that. You know, one of the things that made me want to do things like that was I used to look at Clyde and all the things and wonderful things that he done, and and I've seen how many people he's helped, and how happy and how much joy that seemed to give him. And when I started helping people, that's what I felt. I felt that joy, and I really enjoy that joy. You know,
That's awesome.
it's a great thing to be able to.
Well, one of the things, you've always done that I've seen is that you've always been engaged in recovery with an effort to help other people, whether it's working here and helping the guys or creating businesses, and like a lawn care business and other things. I mean, I know you've started transition houses for guys to transition, and all of your endeavors have been, even work endeavors have been ways to help serve and care for people in recovery. And I think that's a powerful testimony, and part of the key way that you have kind of continued to strengthen your recovery is in that. As you think about this last 10-year journey, what have some of the threats to your sobriety been? I mean, what are the things that have kind of maybe knocked you off your game or threatened you in some way?
Well, there's a few things that I can't lie. As a drug addict, I know that we want to use, and to not want to use, you have to work hard. And so it's really easy and I, as an employee over the last 10 years here, I can see just how easy it is, even more so than it was for myself. Because I, had many relapses before I came here, and so I know what it's like to relapse and how it feels afterwards and all of that. And I know that it's not easy. So some of the things that I remember is playing. One of the big things was, praying. For me, if I felt like I wanted to use, I would pray about it. And I'd listen. I remember listening to other people's advice on what to do if you get that urge, play the tape back, give it a day, thinking about it, don't use today, wait till tomorrow, those kind of things. And believe it or not, those little things do help if you use them. A lot of times what I see in a lot of guys is they wait till after they use to call for help.
Right.
And it's too late,
Right.
And I've seen that happen so many times. So I try to learn, I guess, from other people's mistakes, along with my own mistakes of the past. But the one thing that I can say that has made it a lot easier this time is a continued relationship with the Lord. Not thinking about me, thinking about others, and how it would affect others if I did relapse.
Right.
Not even worrying about how it would affect me, worrying about how it would affect the people that I'm responsible for.
Right.
Because at one point, I was responsible for 12 guys staying in my transition houses, and that was a lot of stress. Because in the length of time that they did have the 3 transition houses, a few of the guys have passed away, or left the house and overdosed. And fortunately, I've never lost one at the house, but I have lost people that I cared a lot about in the past. Over the years, many people have died. Especially since this new fentanyl situation has developed.
Right.
Lots of guys have died, and it doesn't get any easier for us to deal with that. And unfortunately, it is a reminder that helps to scare me to death.
Right.
I don't want to be that kind of. I think about things like, what would my daughter think if that happened to me? And I think about those families for those men. And all I want to do is try to be the person that does something about it.
Right. And one of the, you mentioned that as God has kind of rebuilt your life in this new life of recovery, I think there's been a lot of interesting things happen. Certainly you haven't reclaimed your life as maybe you had hoped or that you envisioned it being. But maybe you could share a minute about, I guess, a couple of things that strike me as one, your relationship with your ex-wife and your daughter, how, what's happened there, over the years? Because I know there was times when you were hoping maybe you get back together and, become a big happy family again. It hasn't quite gone that way, but maybe how have things gone between your former wife and your daughter and that type of thing?
It didn't get great right away, Tom, but I wouldn't trade my family life for anything. At this point, it's wonderful. Angela and I, we go to dinner, we go to movies. Sometimes we'll rent a movie and have dinner and watch a movie. We spend time together, we walk. We do things without Meredith and my granddaughter, my new granddaughter. But we also do things with my daughter and my granddaughter and my son-in-law, and we and his mom and dad. We have Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving and all the good holidays,
right.
and we do all these things together as a family. And every year it gets better. And this last year was phenomenal because I've got a new granddaughter, and it's just really great. Even though COVID was here, it still turned out to be a special year,
right.
along with a devastating year at the same time.
Right, right. Yeah, I think a lot of us have been blessed in certain ways. We would never want to go through this, but it's been interesting how our lives have kind of reconfigured to that, and we've experienced some things that we might not have otherwise.
And one of the things that I learned, I think, as a Christian in the last 10 years is that we need to expect some suffering. And this last year, I think, has taught a lot of us how to suffer with grace.
Right, right. So, obviously, we've heard some about your 10-year story in recovery, as well as your time of addiction, and I appreciate you sharing all that. I guess as you look into the future, what do you hope? What do you anticipate? What do you long for? Do you have any particular goals or visions or dreams in terms of where you would like to be or what you are targeting toward as you envision your future?
Well, I do have some small ideas. I want to be a great grandpa, a great dad, a great family man. I want to look back and say, like I see in some of the folks at church, that they've been going to this church for 20 or 30 years, I can look back and I can say I've been going for 10. And to me, that's a pretty big achievement. And I'm looking forward to being able to say maybe 30 before I die, But, I don't know, I guess I do have some goals. I have a friend that I found out has 20 years clean that I grew up with. We were both into mischief when we was younger, and he is in the antique business today. And he actually has two. He has a regular job, but he does an antique business thing on the side. He sells antiques in a co-op, and he buys out houses that have been either foreclosed on or people have passed away and stuff. He gets a lot of antiques, and he's been doing this for the last 15 years. And when he's fixing to retire about the same time I am. He's going to retire when he's 66, but I'm going to try to retire when I'm 70. And we're going to get together and do co-ops, but plus be on the road. Buying and selling antiques. So
cool.
That's going to be my retirement. That's a goal.
Good.
And then, one of the things that I've done, I had 3 transition houses at one point, and now I only have 1. And I don't think I'm actually going to have that one too much longer because the fellow that I'm running it for is thinking about selling it. So. But I did sell my other 2 houses and bought a house, and so that I could move my mom out of a senior living facility that was, loaded with folks because of this COVID thing. Right. I thought that she's 89 this year, and I wanted to give back to her too because, when it came down to the bitter end, she was the only one that was there.
Right. One of the things I appreciate about you, Dana, and it always has inspired me, is your love for your mom and the way you've cared for her. And I've heard in your story just this level of commitment you have to people, to blessing people, to being a part of God's gift to people. And I really appreciate the way you've done that here, the way you've created transition houses, landscaping businesses, and things to help bless other people. and I'm sure you'll continue to do that in the future. And I know you're an inspiration to me. I know you're an inspiration to a lot of the guys here. You're kind of definitely a pillar here in terms of the influence that you bring to this place and the way we enjoy stability today because of your maturity and your consistency. And so I thank you for being our guest today, and thank you for sharing your story with us. And I want to thank you for listening and watching today. If you'd like to know more about His Way and Recovery His Way, you can check out our website at hiswayinc.org.